Hi, I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Episode 9.
Episode 9.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you
All right.
ready?
Yeah, I feel good.
Okay, good.
Let's do this. So today we're going to talk about communication blocks.
Yeah.
Which came up really briefly, I think, in our previous episode because we were talking about something. And at that time, I think we both thought afterwards when we talked about it was like, this could be an episode unto itself. So It seems sort of obvious, but how would you define communication blocks? Because it seems like it's something you talk about a lot in your work.
Mm-hmm.
And why? What is the importance of them?
Well, I like to describe the parent-child relationship or journey, if you will, as being a road that we're on with our kids. And when we start out on that road, we're as close as we can be with them. They are literally in our arms, and we're responsible for their protection and their learning and everything. If we do our job correctly as parents, we put our child down on the road and let them walk away. And the ultimate goal, and this is like so bittersweet, Greg, because the ultimate goal is for them to have independent lives where they don't really need us anymore.
But is there like a cutoff point for that?
Well, no, not necessarily. And
I mean, because I guess your child always needs you along the way forever, but is there and it sort of evolves over through preteen and teens and college age and
Right, exactly. If you think about it, if they're walking away on this road, the road still connects us with them. So what we want to be sure of as parents is that at any point on that road, that journey, which takes as long as it takes, right? Depending on your individual child. At any point, if the child turns around and needs us, they can get back to us. Mm-hmm. The problem is that often along that road, brick by brick, we build up a wall that prevents our children from getting back to us easily because they can't go around it and it gets too high to go over.
So those bricks, I would take it, are the communication blocks that we can sometimes throw up.
Correct. And the communication blocks, we don't intend to block their way to get back to us. That's not our intention. The intention behind each of the ways that we block communication, and there are 10 of them that we'll discuss probably over 2 episodes.
Right. I think we're going to try to so there's 10 communication blocks that you talk about. And I think on this episode, we're going to start with the first 5, and then we'll do the second 5 for the next episode.
Absolutely. So one communication block, right? You can step over a brick in the road. You can step over multiple bricks in the road. Mm-hmm. But the sad thing is that often by the time, and this was written about long ago by a colleague of mine, Ron Taffel, often by the time children are 6 years old, there are so many communication blocks up in that road that it's so difficult for the child to then get back to the parent for help that they're turning to their peers and others for advice or looking to the media. Right? To give
so you
them
mean,
advice.
So even in 6 years, you can build up a learned behavior like, okay, I'm not going to get my needs met there.
Correct.
In ways big and small. I would imagine it certainly varies, right? There's probably some parents that throw up a few and some can be really extreme. But your point is that that's something that can happen right away, really young.
Pretty quickly. Yep. Now, the good news is that even if you have done that, even if your child is 20 years old, right, and you've got a huge wall in between you and that child, you can also break that wall back down. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about how to do that. But it's important before we know we're supposed to do. It's important to know what we're not supposed to do and why these particular blocks become literal blocks, literal bricks in the road that divide us. They create a situation where the child either doesn't feel safe coming back to the parent, or the child is concerned that they're going to be criticized or judged as opposed to supported or helped in whatever they're grappling with, where they'd feel disrespected in some way. So they turn to externals outside of the family to get that respect, to get that confirmation that they are a worthwhile
to get their
human being.
Right, to get their needs met. I mean, as you're talking, it feels like it's almost connected to our previous episode about self-esteem.
Sure.
That as you throw up these, if you're throwing up these communication blocks, that can lead to self-esteem in the child. And it sounds like, they start to look for other places for that. And I imagine sometimes they can find it in healthy ways, but sometimes you might find it in unhealthy ways, whether it's, drugs and alcohol, destructive relationships. Or am I reaching too far on that?
No, you're not reaching too far at all. Maybe you're not reaching far enough, because one of the other ways that kids reach out and get affirmation about who they are is by looking to the media. And for the most part,
what do you mean when you say they look to the media?
They look to the images and thoughts and values that the media projects. So that what happens is that they find their identity not within the family system of values, because it doesn't feel safe to go back there because of these communication blocks. But they look to the media, who generally has very different.
Well, not their needs in mind.
Correct. The media is wanting to sell you something. I'll often actually listen to commercials with the sound off and try to guess what they're trying to sell me. I can't get it, because it's about, somebody, some bikini clad supermodel, dancing, or some, two gorgeous people kissing or whatever. And it's a sale for a car. And I'm like, that's weird. But the problem is that those messages, that if we listen with the sound off, right, we're still taking in those messages.
Yeah, of course.
Communicate something to kids about what their identity should be.
Right, their identity, but also you said values. So it seems like the idea is because obviously, ideally, what parents are trying to do is impart their values to their kids.
Yes.
But if they do it with communication blocks along the way, that's not going to get through. And you're saying that they can turn to other things like the media to find out their own values or what their self-worth is, or
right, because they're going to have questions. Our kids are going to have questions as they grow and as they experience new things. But if mom and dad are the judgmental, critical people who throw up communication blocks that basically say, don't talk to me about this, then the kids still have to figure out the answer to their question. So the media would have them believe that the answer to most questions is that you have to be thin, rich, beautiful,
have 1 million followers.
The likes are very important.
And I guess it's okay, because obviously that's going to be part of it, because I have young kids, that social media landscape is part of their lives, but I guess it can get tricky if that's the only place they're going for affirmation or to be heard or to find their values or how they identify.
Right, exactly. Because those are the loudest values. And the truth of the matter is, even if you've got a great relationship with your kid, even if that path, that journey you're on with them is really smooth, the media messages are so overpowering in terms of the frequency that our kids take them in, that it's still difficult as parents to, under the best circumstances, to impart our values to our children. So I think that creates in parents a anxiety. Am I going to be able to impart my values? Am I going to be able to tell my child that it's important to, this has come up in groups before, right? To impart the importance of good hygiene on my child.
Right.
to impart the importance of a good work ethic in terms of doing homework and
Sure.
working hard at something to achieve your success.
Right. And if the parent has anxiety about competing with this and imparting their values, maybe sometimes they can communicate them in a way that's a communication block.
150%. You got it.
Okay. Or hear the child in the way they respond to the child's needs, questions, issues, or whatever can be a communication block. Probably now more than ever because they are competing against all these outside influences.
Right.
That are, the social media piece, which that'll be an episode for us down the road more specifically.
Yeah, for sure.
But so is there anything else generally before we dive into individual communication blocks? It seems like this must be something you hear about all the time or comes up for you in all of your groups and one-on-ones and stuff.
All the time. It's one of the very first things I try to teach,
right,
because it's so fundamental to opening the communication that we don't engage in these communication blocks. I think the only other thing I would say before we go into specifics is parents don't have malintent here.
Sure.
And we said that in the last episode about self-esteem. It's not that the parent intends to, in the last episode, lower self-esteem, or in this episode, to block communication. The intent is usually positive, in terms of imparting values, in terms of...
They think they're helping.
Yes. Teaching,
right.
100%.
Showing them the way.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. The problem is the way that it's communicated, which is why it's so important to not just know what not to do, but also to know what to do differently.
Right. And I'd imagine like so much of this stuff that we talk about becomes really reflexive for the parent. If you have a learned way of communicating, and if the child has a learned way of perceiving, because you talk about this often too, that these are not a magic panacea. It won't happen immediately, that all of this stuff that you talk about, like anything, especially if you have this reflexive way of communicating, is really going to take some work and take some time.
Oh, yeah. Parenting is... I think we said this in the very first episode, or maybe we say it at the beginning of every episode. Parenting is a hard job. And if you find it super easy, you may not really be doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to denigrate people who have an easy time of it.
Sure.
But the reality is that our kids are growing up in a very complex world. Technology has made it even more complex. So parents will often say to me, well, my mother or father did that to me, and look, I turned out just fine. Yeah, but there weren't all of these other influences.
Yeah, you kind of have to
there.
evolve with the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the media was not...
Oh, yeah, it wasn't even... I mean, it's shifted even over the last year. I mean, it's kind of lightning speed at this point in terms of the evolution of these things, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, texting, just the way they communicate. Yeah, it's a pretty wild time. And it's a lot of work to keep up with the curiosity around that with your child, especially if you're got a teen or preteen that doesn't want to have anything to do with you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's an uphill battle. That's a Sisyphean task.
Right. So I love that you put it out there. Like, it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard, and so we need more techniques. We need more recognition of the ways in which we can kind of go astray instead of staying on this path with our kids and giving them tools. In part, that relies upon us having tools ourselves.
Right, of course. And I love this metaphor and picture of the road with the bricks. Right? So you still have a connection, and they can turn around and come back if they need you.
Yeah. And again, if you're doing your job right, they need you less and less because they already have your values. They already have your sensibilities. And their job is to go out and make a life of their own with their own found family. So it's bittersweet because if we do our job right,
they should go off.
They go off. Yeah.
But you want to keep that road open if they have to turn back, which they always do.
Absolutely
I'm old
do.
and I still call my father and say, hey, I don't quite understand this. Or my mom,
Absolutely.
Right.
My dad, before he passed, I called him frequently. He was one of my rocks during 9/11. because he just had this sensibility, and I could call him and freaking out about anthrax, and he could just talk me down off that ledge. And it's because we didn't have communication blocks.
Yeah, that you felt comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay, so why don't we go through the first 5?
Okay.
Number 1, you have commanding.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that manifest itself?
So commanding can be anything from commanding about feelings, stop whining, quit complaining, right? Or it can be commanding about stuff that needs to get done. Do your homework, get in the shower, pack your backpack, put your shoes on.
Now, we've all done that.
Of course.
It feels pretty easy. You can get frustrated. But when you do that, what is the child hearing?
So the child it depends on which message you're giving. So if you're saying quit whining, stop complaining, calm down, right? If the message is about feelings, then the child is hearing that those feelings aren't valid. And as we talked about in the last episode, the importance of having valid, or maybe it was the episode before, validating your child's feelings, allowing them to develop a tolerance for their feelings and not be told to basically shut up, right?
Right.
If you're commanding around get dressed, do your homework, that kind of thing, what they're hearing is disrespect. So it's not that they're hearing a particular message. It's that they're hearing a particular feeling from you that's disrespectful in nature. And I think I'll talk about both sides. When we command around feelings, stop feeling like that, quit whining, calm down, I think it's because of our lack of tolerance for those
feelings,
challenging feelings that everybody has. And probably it comes up because we're in a hurry and the feelings are delaying things. And, we as adults, we've got a time schedule that we've got to keep to, and we've got to keep them to. I think when we are...
But basically what you're saying is what the child sort of hears is my feeling is not valid and I should put it away.
Exactly.
Which, as we talked about in the previous episode, they don't really get put away. They just sort of squirt out in other areas.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And when we are commanding around behaviors, which would be pack your backpack, get ready, we're trying to use a shortcut for setting boundaries. The problem with shortcuts I've found in parenting is that they are longer in the end.
In getting the result you want, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You mean if you're able to take more of the time and the communication, you'll actually get the result you want quicker?
Yes. So people will say to me, but, setting boundaries, it takes so long. And my reply is, you're probably already taking the same amount of time to do it.
Saying put that down 15 times?
Ineffectively, right? Is it working for you? I don't know. Is it working? I don't think
right.
so. So, when we think of parenting in general, we do want to think about not are you a good parent or are you a bad parent, but are you being effective? So effectiveness involves two components. The first is what you're doing working? Is it accomplishing the goal that you have in mind?
I'm sure that's a question you ask a lot, right? When you work with people.
Oh, yeah.
When they say, this is how it's going, and you say, how's that working?
Yeah, I try not to be snarky about it. So how's that working?
So how's that going for you?
Yeah.
How's that berating working?
Sure, it's great, right? Thumbs up. Yeah. So the first question we want to ask is it working? Because if it's not working, obviously it's not effective. Mm-hmm. But the second question I find is really important and often neglected, which is, what am I teaching my child? So when you think about this commanding, the commanding communication block, and we're saying, put your backpack on. What are you teaching your child about time management? Probably nothing. You're teaching them to respond to an authority figure's command. As opposed to if you were to set a limit, which involves a slightly longer explanation. So
this is the flip side, because as you're talking, especially on this one, I'm probably going to feel this way about everyone that we bring up, and I want the audience to get that too. Like, we all do this. Like, as you're describing it, I've done that a million times.
Of course.
Whether you're frustrated, you're at your wit's end, you're just not thinking, you're rushing, you're not taking the time. Like we all do this. It isn't easy because it sounds like you're about to go into the flip side of, so if you want to try to do it, what's the flip side of commanding? So instead of that, what would you want to try to do?
You'd want to set a boundary, set a limit. And one of the benefits of providing an explanation around a limit for a child is that it helps them internalize your values. Now, as we talked about, I think we talked about setting limits in one of our episodes with I messages, right? We don't want to think that reasoning is going to accomplish the same thing as setting a limit. And we do want to recognize that setting a limit, what we know about providing a child an explanation when we set a limit is that they internalize our values. So if you think about commanding, that's almost the opposite. They're simply responding to an authority figure, maybe out of fear, and there's no real value about time management. But hear it this way. Instead of saying, put your backpack on, if you were to say, when you dawdle about putting your backpack on, I feel concerned because we're not going to get to school on time. I would like you to put your backpack on when I ask you. All of a sudden, we have a rich piece of communication about the value of being on time to school, the necessity of paying attention to time and or to an initial request. We have a rich communication that involves how their behavior is impacting others. We're going to be late. And that could be I'm the parent, we're going to be late to school. I'm going to be late to my job. It could be we, the other siblings, are going to all be late because of you. And it's framed in such a way that the child can internalize it for later. Now, if you've got a tween or a teen, you're probably not going to use that full I message that we've talked about in the past and that I just did here, which is I feel because I would like you to. You could say to a tween or teen, I feel concerned that we're not going to get to school on time because you haven't got your backpack on, right? It's a shorter version.
Sure.
Tweens and teens are more tolerant of that.
Yeah, they can sort of maybe take that in.
Yeah, for sure. And a younger child can't necessarily. We really need the full richness of that I message.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's obvious, but it's just like that command is so abrupt. It feels, it's like you said, then they get a learned behavior of reacting maybe out of fear, I'm going to get in trouble. So it sounds like you're already, even in that little small phrase, it's just sort of a little more thoughtful and you've now imparted a value almost in that moment.
Yeah, no question. And listen, Greg, I've done my share of commanding.
Of course.
Right? I mean, I am not proud of any of it, right? And the reality is, I'm not a robot. You're not a robot. Parents shouldn't have to be robots. We've talked about that before. You shouldn't have to be perfect at this. So every once in a while, you're going to say, get them back, we're going to explode and be just furious at the child because sometimes the I message or the I statement is, going to still fall on deaf ears. Those occasional outbursts are okay if they're not the norm. So I'm not opposed to the occasional outburst that comes from an organic place as opposed to a pre-planned place. So if you say, oh, I'm going to scream and yell and command because I know that will get my child's attention. So if you're using it as a technique, then it doesn't serve in the future to really let your child know when they've crossed a line.
Because every time feels like they've crossed a line, you mean?
Yes.
Right. So then that explosion actually has meaning because it's not a reflexive thing you just do all the time.
Right, exactly. And again, I don't want parents to ever pre-plan it. Like, oh, I haven't used my explosion technique today or this week or this month. I think I'm going to use it for this one.
But but you said we all get fed up and sometimes you lose it.
Sure.
But if that's an organic thing that comes out of the moment, which we've all been there and that can definitely happen. But you're saying as opposed to that's the reflexive behavior of the parent, if that comes up once in a while, it's also going to be more effective, I would think anyway, too.
Right, exactly.
And not repeatedly destructive if that's the way you do it all the time.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the point. If you do it all the time, repeatedly, it is destructive.
So that's it. So that's a communication block to getting the result you want, right?
Mhm.
And that is that what these all are about? Is like getting the result you want from the child, correcting a misbehavior, imparting values. I mean, I guess these communication blocks can get mixed in a lot of different ways in a lot of different scenarios, right?
Exactly. So commanding just happens to be one that parents are using to set limits, either set limits around the child's feelings or set limits around the child's behaviors.
Well, and that one also seems really easy. Like we all do that because
Yeah.
it's really easy to go there quickly.
Well, and unfortunately for our listeners, I think they're going to find that they're all kind of easy to go there. All of the communication blocks exist because they're easy to do. They're easy to slip into. Most parents, when I go through this list of communication blocks and we reach the end, they're like, well, you just took all my techniques away. So thanks so much. I guess I'm going to have to put duct tape over my mouth and not talk to my children anymore.
Right.
And I get that. They're familiar. We were raised with these very blocks. They're easy to slip into. We don't even notice when we're doing them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because most of the time the intent is positive.
Okay, great. So the next one you have is advising.
Mm-hmm.
How does that manifest as a communication block?
So advising often exists because we as parents want our children to do something differently, right? And we think we have the answer to how to go about that. So advising, again, and all of these communication blocks are inherently disrespectful in nature.
But also familiar. I think as we go through these, I'm going to go, oh yeah, I do that. I do that one. Okay, so advising.
If
So
you're
yeah,
being
so,
honest with yourself.
yeah, of course. So your
of course.
intent, which you keep making that point, which I think is important, that your intent is, I'm going to help here
Yes.
by telling them what they should do.
Exactly. So, I mean, advising isn't necessarily difficult to explain what it sounds like. It could be, well, you really should get your homework done before you play on your Xbox. Right? That's giving advice. Or your kid comes home with a problem at school. Well, here's how you need to handle that. You need to go back in and talk to the teacher about that. I mean, anytime we give advice, whether it's about something that happened when you weren't there or something that is happening
in the moment
that
right.
you want to do them to do differently, it creates one of these bricks on the road. And
it just feels like, well, I guess we'll get to that because as you're talking, I'm thinking like, well, you do want to give advice though sometimes and be helpful, and it might be necessary, but I guess there's a way to do it. So because what happens then? Like if you feel if you're giving like this is how you should do it. Well, if I was you, this is what I would do. Does that sort of negate their experience? Is that the issue with it?
Yeah. So one of the things that happens is that often parents will jump into giving advice without fully listening to what the child's feeling about it. Because, hearkening back again to one of our previous episodes, we're not tolerant of the feelings that the child is having around whatever it is. So we jump in, well, just do this. Well, why can't you do this?
Fixing it for them,
which doesn't give them the independent skills that they need to problem solve on their own. And since
and can this start? I imagine it shifts over time over the age of the child, but it plays out from young 2, 3, 4 up through high school and college, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, it gets manifested differently, but it can be an issue even with a younger child when you're trying to fix or give advice.
Exactly. In many cases, it robs the child of the experience that is the, I hate this word, but the growth experience, right? Because it jumps over the struggle that the child is having. And that struggle may be around feelings, that struggle may be around solutions, but it jumps over that and tries to, again, this is a shortcut that parents use to...
Let's get right to the fix.
Let's get right to the fix because I don't want to tolerate your feelings around that.
Right, or I don't have time and I don't want to deal with this. This is a problem. I'm an adult. I know how to do this. This is what you should do.
Right. Exactly. And that sends a strong message to the child that they're not competent because mommy and daddy have to fix it. And I have to tell you, Greg, I see a lot of this.
A lot of advising.
Oh, yeah. To the point where parents become the fixers and the kid can't think for themselves. In the most extreme versions, these are parents whose method of giving advice is to do it for the child. So these are parents who do their child's homework for them. These are parents who do their child's science projects for them. And I've seen it with parents whose kids are going into college, parents who write their children's college essays for them.
Sure.
So those are I consider the extreme versions of giving advice. The less extreme versions would be, you really need to wear your hair in a ponytail today. Or I think you should, talk to your friend about the spat that you've had.
Right. So the other thing that I'm reminded of, even with the episode we did about getting comfortable with uncomfortable feelings, the self-esteem, that unless you build up a reservoir of experiences of, like, if something's getting solved for you all the time, you need to build up a reservoir of experiences of being able to do that. So as you get older, you have that there, and your parent isn't always stepping in to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do, what if you have great advice though? Like, the child is way off.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can help them. So how do you do it then? Because we all want to give advice. We all want to be helpful. How do you do it in a way that they can hear and it's not a communication block?
So there are a couple of ways. One is very simple. One way is to say, do you want some advice? And then if they say, yes, I do, then you have your entry point.
What if they say, no, I don't want your advice?
You say, okay, I'm sure you'll figure it out.
What if it's so hard that they're so off and you're like, if I just told them this, it would fix it.
I know.
You don't do it?
No, you can do it a different way,
okay.
Right? The simplest is to just say, do you want my
I think that's
advice?
Great. Very simple. Yeah, that makes sense.
My daughter used to call us, and because she's in the field as well now, and she has studied this and lived it, poor thing, she used to call us and say, Mom and Dad, I need you to block communication. And we'd say, which way?
What do you mean? Why would she say that?
Because she knew all the communication blocks.
Right.
And she wanted advice, or she wanted us to do one
like,
of the
ignore
others.
them. I want your advice.
Exactly.
Right. Please tell me what to do.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, but that's coming from the child, right? So that's very explicit. Like, please give me your advice.
Exactly.
So that's great. So that's a way to do it. But like I said, what if it's they say no and you're like, oh God, they're so close.
So the other way to do it, first and foremost, you always want to listen, because you don't want to go spouting off your brilliant ideas if you don't have kind of all of the information.
Well,
so you want to listen.
Sure. And you talk about this all the time, but I think all of these things we should always just continue to bring up. You talk about curiosity all the time.
All the time.
So it's really just about being in all these different kinds of situations. So here's another situation. Being curious about, even if you know the answer, well, what are you struggling with? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I love that actually, Greg. What do you tell me the struggle. Tell me what you're struggling with here.
And do you have some ideas? So then you're sort of because a lot of this too, what we talk about, it's always, so it feels like this thread between the two of you that it's, even if you know the answer and like, I could solve this in 2 seconds, so that they feel a piece of it.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm thinking through this correctly, that, what's the struggle? You're being curious. And do you have any ideas about how you might problem solve it, or how you might fix it, or how you might deal with it?
Beautiful. And if they say no, which, depending on the age of your child, you're likely to get a no. But if they say no, that, first of all, let me just reiterate to our listeners that what you said was textbook perfect. You want to say, do you have any ideas? You're
I get
welcome.
a star today. I'm very, very excited. Okay, so you want to say, I'm sorry.
So you want to say, first of all, I hear how tough this is, right? And this is a difficult decision. And, have you thought about a way that you might be able to handle it?
Mm-hmm.
Or how did you handle it, right? Because sometimes they're coming to you because they already did something, or they did nothing. But the reality is, That's a way of handling things, is
Mm-hmm.
to do nothing. So how did you handle? I didn't do anything. So did that feel okay to you?
How
to
did it
do
play
nothing?
out
Yeah, how did it play
when
out?
you made that choice, or when you right?
Exactly. And if you're getting a lot of discouraged responses, then you do have, and this is my out for parents.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So they need to
We have an ace.
Yeah, write this down
Okay.
wherever you are, or make a note of it into your phone. It's not giving advice if we frame it in an open-ended question. So that's going to sound like, well, what do you think would happen if you blank? Do you think that would work? So now, instead
Well,
of
now
saying,
you've given the power to them. You haven't told them. You've said, "What about this? Have you thought about it?" So they can then go,
right. And if they say no, which they probably will, it still goes into the suggestion bank, that they are preparing or putting deposits into. Because there's a lot of reasons kids will reject you when you give them a piece of your wisdom. And most of the time it's protection for their self-esteem. Because if you give something, think about it in adult terms. If you're all upset and you're complaining and you're really having trouble with something and you're really upset about something, and somebody gives you a solution that
"Oh yeah."
is super easy, wow, you feel like an idiot, right?
Well,
so you have
also-
to defend your position.
Yeah, of course. But also, as you were talking, I was also thinking the idea that, and I do think this is kind of a male thing that you want to fix, where it's like,
Right.
I'm really upset. I feel this way. This is so disappointing. And you want to come in with like, well, this is what you should do. And it's more about, oftentimes, I think it probably, especially with the child, it can be about, you talk about this a lot, just being with them emotionally, with their feelings about how they feel about it, as opposed to jumping right in to give the advice.
Right, exactly. And the goal really should be to stimulate their independence around it. So we do have this potential to give them advice. We do have the potential of, pulling from our banks of hopefully wisdom, because we are older, if not wiser, and saying, well, what do you think would happen if you did
I
X,
love
Y,
that.
Z?
So it's the phrasiness of the question. And I also love the idea of, do you want advice? Do you want some advice? Maybe following, how was that for you? So if you start with the curiosity piece, they come home and they've struggled with, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, something at school, that
Right.
you talk about the experience.
Yeah.
So that's great. I like those, because those, a lot of times it's about like, what can I hold on to in these tools that's simple, that I can remember? So it is, ask them, would you like some
Right.
advice? Be curious. Ask them if they would like some advice. Ask it in a way that makes them feel a part of it. Have you ever thought of?
Right. And the great thing about it is, if they reject you, you can offer something else, as long as it's, what do you think would happen if, or I wonder what would happen if, and then throwing it back to them, do you think that would work? But if they accept it, it's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, yeah, I think I'll do that. And you say, great idea.
Mhm.
Sounds like you came up with something,
Mm-hmm.
because they've adopted it. They've owned it.
Sure.
Greg, the other thing about this framework becomes so important, to acknowledge the feelings, to ask if they can think of something that would help them, would solve the problem, to put, your ideas in there in this open-ended question. So when my son was in 4th grade, it became apparent that, because we'd switched pediatricians, that they had missed one of their immunizations.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to pick my son up from school, and they were very, very anxious about getting this immunization, potentially. And I want the listener and you to hear the way in which this unfolded, because it unfolded according to the script that I had done with them for years, of acknowledging feelings.
The script you'd done with your child?
Yes.
Okay.
So the script that we've been talking about, as opposed to giving advice, acknowledging feelings, asking if they can think of something that would help, and then potentially saying, what do you think would happen if? So my son got into the cab and said, Mommy, I am so nervous. I said, oh, you're so nervous. they said, yes, I've got butterflies in my stomach. Do you want to know how big those butterflies are? And I said, yeah, I want to know. And they stretched their hands out like, as wide as they could. And I said, wow, those are big butterflies. I'm just so nervous that I'm going to have to get a shot. And I said, oh, you're just so nervous that you might have to get a shot. Yeah, and I'm wondering if there's anything I can think of that I could do about that. That's coming from them. Right?
Mhm.
Not from me. But it's that, can you think of something? So then they said, well, I wonder what would happen if, when I get there, if I have to get a shot, the doctor can give it to me in this arm and I can look at you and you can make funny faces and then I'll laugh. And I said, wow, that sounds like something that you could do. And so in that processing that they did in that cab of their anxiety and of a potential solution, you can hear that kind of diagram that I'm suggesting that parents go through
Mhm.
instead of giving advice.
Well, and you were just sticking with them too through it, right?
Just sticking with them. And they ultimately came up with that solution themselves. I had nothing to do with it. And we got to the doctor and they had to have an immunization and they followed through on that.
Did you
and
make some awesome funny faces for them?
I did. And they pretend laughed with tears rolling
Well,
down
they
their
probably went for
face.
it because it was their idea, even if they were like, this isn't working, but this is the thing I came up with. I'm going to fake laugh my way through this.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Because if you had come up with that, they would have been, thanks for the stupid idea, Mom. That didn't work.
No question. So, we really, instead of giving advice, we really want to stimulate their independence around this stuff because they have to ultimately think for themselves. And the other thing that's true is that the advice of parents is never going to be accurate to the reality that the child is experiencing.
But I think in all of this, what I keep hearing as you're talking, like there's just a way that you have a line connected to the child, an invisible line of listening. So you're having this experience together as opposed to, I'm going to give you the experience. This is what
Right.
you do.
And you're staying on that path, that journey.
Yeah, and you're connected as opposed to like, I'm going to tell you how. And then the child's like, okay, I'm going to be quiet and listen.
Right,
And-
exactly.
Right. And
Yeah.
then develop low self-esteem and a drug problem. Okay, moving on. This is the next one that you have. Placating.
So placating is usually an attempt on the part of the parent to make the child feel better about something or to feel better about themselves. So it might sound like, you're a handsome boy no matter what they said about you.
Mm.
Or
You're the most talented singer in the whole school.
even though you didn't get that part
Mm.
in the chorus for the musical. Yeah, so it's, generally placating occurs when parents are not tolerating their
Trying to
child's
diminish an uncomfortable feeling.
uncomfortable feelings. And look, it comes from a wonderful place, I think, ultimately, of wanting to reassure your child that their self-worth doesn't have to be based in something somebody said or a single failure at something.
And that's value. There's value in that, but I think, and this one feels a little connected in a way to the episode we did about helping kids get comfortable with uncomfortable feelings.
Right.
There seems like when you're placating, there's some negation going on there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, I think the impulse is understandable. Like, I don't want them to feel bad, because that's a great one. Because I said, you're the greatest singer, and you connected it to, like, if the kid didn't even get a part in the play, you didn't get a
Right.
part, but you're still a great singer. You're the best singer.
Right.
It also can be dangerous if they're not the greatest singer. You're sort of saying this to assuage their, concerns. They're uncomfortable. They're upset. Their sadness.
For sure. And it's, I think, an attempt to get them to move through it quickly
Mhm.
as opposed to experience it. I mean, tolerate it,
Is that why it's a communication block? Because you're negating the experience of talking about that experience, the feeling or whatever it is. That's why it's a communication block. Because
Mhm.
in placating, you're saying, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't think about that. Don't feel about that. Let's not talk about the hard parts of that.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
And why it's a communication block?
Absolutely. Because you're not spending the time to validate whatever that child's reality is in the moment. And again, Greg, I think it comes from a good place. I think parents see their children through different eyes than the choral director of a musical or or whatever. Another kid tells them they're fat or ugly, and we see our children through different eyes, and we don't want them to suffer those
Of course.
insults or hard feelings or whatever. But the problem is that they're still going to feel that feeling, even if we're trying to placate them. All we're doing is shifting it. The other thing that occurs to me about this is that parents, a lot of the time, kids wind up thinking in their head, I don't believe you. You're my mother. You're my father. You
Right.
have to say that.
If
You're
it
my
feels-
parent.
Yeah, a kid can feel if it feels false.
Right, exactly. And even if it's true in the parent's eyes, this is the most talented, gorgeous, athletically inclined, whatever. Even if the parent really believes that, it doesn't land with the child if their reality is different, if they're feeling something different from what the parent is explaining. So we lose cred
Mhm.
when we don't stick with those feelings, when we try to placate our children out of those feelings.
How do you make a combination of it? Because as we're going through all of these, I'm thinking that I guess it can be misguided if it's simply that. But how do you do a piece of that if I don't know what is the flip side of placating then? Like what do you do if that's a communication block? But you do have some of those feelings about like you have talent, you did work really hard. What is it? How do you handle it in a more positive way with the child so it doesn't become a communication block?
Well, again, we go back to listening, right? That's the first thing, is to listen and acknowledge that they're feeling whatever their feeling is. They're feeling unattractive. They're feeling untalented. There's a number of ways to get your opinion about whatever that is across. One is to, after you listen and acknowledge, to say, I guess it's not probably going to help, but I have to give you my opinion, which is, I think you're very talented. Or, I guess it's not going to help, but I think that you're very athletic.
And so it's okay to share that piece.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's okay to share that piece after the acknowledgement of the disappointment. Like if they've come home and haven't gotten even a single part in the play, to simply go, you didn't get a part, that's okay because you're the greatest singer. We know how great you are. And
Right.
So it's okay to have a piece of that in a way, not that explicit. This is what I think you're saying. So tell me if I'm right, that in all of these things, again, we keep sort of revisiting these things that I think is really important, but that it's more important as opposed to let me placate and push that aside. Let me acknowledge the feeling first, the disappointment, the frustration, the upset, the unfairness of it all. Sure. But then also recognize, I see how hard you work and I've seen you play and you do have a lot of skills, on the court or whatever it is.
Right. Exactly.
Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, I think they have to be listened to first. I think that's so critical because that's what clears the path of communication blocks ultimately, is when we listen. And that clears the path of all of these communication blocks that we're talking about and going to talk about. I think the qualifying factor, I would say, is how quickly you jump in with placating. If you're trying to short circuit the child's emotional response to something, that's what becomes the communication block, because it says, I don't want to listen to your reality. I don't want to listen to your hurt feelings. It's too difficult for me. So I'm going to placate you. I'm going to tell you that you're wonderful and fantastic and beautiful and talented and athletic and whatever. And I think if we jump in too quickly, and I think this is probably true of all of these communication blocks where we really need to be listening more than anything else, I think when we jump in too quickly, it puts a brick in the road.
Mm-hmm.
That the child then, the next time that they feel insulted or sad or
They're not gonna come to
rejected,
you.
no, because they know that you're gonna just oppose them. You're
Mhm.
just gonna say that's not true, and they're just jealous, and don't pay any attention to them, and that's not helpful in the long run. It doesn't help them get over their feelings, and it doesn't help them create solutions if they are, if it was an athletic competition and they could have worked harder or whatever,
Sure.
it doesn't help them come to a realization about their autonomy over some of these things. And that's not to say that some kids aren't victims. And I've had a number of, situations where obviously life isn't fair, as
Right.
we've said before, and,
Right.
and kids are not fairly treated. But I think I think as parents, when we're trying to do shortcuts, it's probably never going to go well.
Well, it also just, in that one, it feels like a false recognition of what's going on, which can be tricky, I think. So why don't we do one more, which I know that's going to be 4 communication blocks instead of 5. So why don't we break it up that way? We'll do 4. We'll cover 4 this episode, and we'll do the following 6 on the next episode. So the next one you have is distracting, which seems a little bit similar in terms of maybe what you're doing. How does that manifest, you think?
So distracting can be, believe it or not, can start with when a child is an infant and starts to realize that they don't like to have their diaper changed, right? And so the parent typically will go, here's a toy, look at the toy, here, play with the toy, and distract them from the experience that they clearly would rather not have. So it starts innocently enough, right? And then it can progress to, your child coming home with feelings that you're having trouble tolerating. And you say, oh, you know what? Hey, the big game's on tonight. Let's watch the big game together.
Right.
You want to do that? You don't have to do your homework even. Let's watch the big game together. So it's a diversion.
Well, and I keep having this image, because you see it a lot now. The phones are so tricky. Like, I'll literally see the 3-year-old in the stroller that's like crying, trying to keep back tears.
You are
But
so
the
right.
mother is shoved, so now they have the TV show on the phone. And I don't want to be dismissive of that. I'm sure I've done it, and I get the impulse of it. But every time I see it, I'm a little like, because you know that it's like, upset. And again, who knows the circumstance of why? But ideally, that moment always gets me, because I just feel like, those are really getting shoved aside. Those feelings, that upset. Here, watch this show. And actually, you can see they're numbed out. I mean, you can see them sort of watching the show, so they're kind of distracted, but like, those feelings don't go anywhere. So the kid is actually still like trying to hold back his tears while he watches this show. And I guess that's another form of distraction, would you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's teaching them to distract themselves away from uncomfortable feelings, as opposed to live into that feeling, tolerate that feeling, move through that feeling. They become the ones who, over time, when they have a feeling, are watching YouTube after YouTube after YouTube.
Sure.
Or binge watching Gilmore Girls, or binge watching, or numbing out in terms of a video game.
Yeah. I mean, and we did a whole episode about this that people can listen to, about working through being uncomfortable with being comfortable with uncomfortable feelings, like working through uncomfortable feelings with your child. But distracting feels like a communication block, because it's not an acknowledgement of those feelings again, right?
Right, exactly. And listen, distraction can be a tool in anybody's toolbox to get through something that's challenging, right? So let's say that you don't like going to the dentist. So you have that dental appointment coming up. So you think to yourself, well, you know what? I'm going to stop by my favorite little coffee shop and get a latte afterwards. And that's going to help, right? So that becomes a solution to distract yourself away from the event. That's not bad.
Sure.
Unless it's for everything, unless it is the solution of choice for uncomfortable feelings.
Right, because when you first started, when I asked you about distracting, that's what you immediately went to, like, well, what if we did this? Well, what if we did this very quickly? Again, it's like this sort of rush to fix, like, let's move away from that. Let's move away from that.
Exactly.
Because you're saying, like, sure, distraction, it's not something you can't utilize here and there, but if it becomes a reflexive habit to you, like commanding, like any of these, it seems like, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I really look at all of these communication blocks as shortcuts that parents try to use because they think it's going to take less time. The problem is it takes more time in the long run.
I think that's so important to remember because I can hear people listening to this, and because we've all done this, and as we're going through this, I'm like, yep. And I think that's the key, though, that you do really believe, like, I do it because it's quicker result, but it's not really, right? It's not only that, it's not helpful ultimately.
Right. You may get a result more quickly, but you're not necessarily going to get a long-lasting positive result that can be repeated by the kid. And that's a problem. We need to be making sure that we're effective with our kids so that we give them the tools to move along that road, that path. They can still turn back for help, but that they're gathering tools along the way so that they need less help as they get older.
So I want to really quickly end with, and I think we should open the next episode with this, so we don't have to go into it too much here, but with all of these things, and you talk about this all the time, that the most important thing is a circle back.
Yes.
Because we all screw up, we all do it wrong, we all placate, command, we do all those things, but you talk often about the ideas that if you do that, and you're gonna, because no one's perfect, that you circle back. And because we'll go into it, I hope people will listen to the next episode and maybe we'll go into it a little deeper at the top of the episode. But just really quickly, what's the circle back?
Well, as my mentor said, it's not what you do or say, it's what you do or say after what you've already done or said. So we're going to things are going to slip out of our mouths, and we're not vacuums that can suck those words back in. But it's about recognizing when we do it wrong and circling back for ourselves. In other words, revisiting it for ourselves and thinking through, how could I have done that differently? And then revisiting it for our children, going back to them and say, you know what, that wasn't a very productive response that I gave you. So I want to come back and say that I could have said or should have said X, Y, or Z. That's the circle back.
And that's a key to all of this, right?
Everything. It's a key to being a human being, because we are human beings and we're going to mess up from time to time. And it's redemptive. I mean, we can redeem our mistakes. We can learn from our mistakes. All we have to do is admit them and then walk it back. Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends. And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling, please visit parentinghorizons.com. Or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.